Hello, it's Paul here from the QE with yet another English language A-level video. Now this one is revealing the mysteries of what you put in a language investigation conclusion stroke evaluation. So here we go. How many paragraphs are you writing? You are writing only 2 paragraphs because at the end of the day you've only got 200 words. So 2 paragraphs will do the business. Your first paragraph should be the conclusion bit. And this is what you put in the conclusion. First of all, in your first sentence, restate the overall question. Okay? Then what you need to be doing is picking out 3 or so important findings from your analysis. Okay, so you're restating and summarizing them only in a few words, making sure that they link in logically to the question that you've asked, and maybe showing that, you know, those findings have actually raised other sorts of questions that if you'd had a longer investigation, if you'd had more words that you could have used, then you could have pursued them. So 3 or so significant findings. And make sure that you emphasize that actually there is a sense of discovery here, that you were genuinely surprised by the thing, you found something out. What you don't want to do is just to give the impression that you went through the motions and you kind of proved something that was pretty self-evident from the first place. So use adverbials such as interestingly or surprisingly. Even if the findings were not particularly surprising or interesting, try and use those sorts of adverbials. Refer, of course, to your old friends, the contextual influences, by which I mean things like purposes and audience and genre and mode. So those sorts of elements. But it could also be wider kind of situational context of your data, or indeed social or historical context. So make sure that a good old AO3 context gets an outing there. And the final thing I'd say on this bit is do make sure that you answer your question quite tentatively. After all, you've only had a very limited sample of data, so it would be foolish to make overbold claims about things. So answer your question using kind of epistemic modal auxiliary verbs like could or might, or using hedging adverbials like perhaps. So be tentative in your conclusion. Now, the second paragraph is your evaluation. It's kind of like a self-assessment that you're doing in about 100 words, where you assess the strengths, but also the limitations of your language investigation. So a possible limitation could be the recognition that actually your data was so limited, it doesn't necessarily show representations of, you know, large-scale patterns that would go across a mass of data. And in this bit, you also need to be explaining, you know, if you'd had more time and if you'd had a bigger word count, like in the good old days when a language investigation used to be 4,000 words, if you'd had more time and a longer word count, then you would have done other sorts of things. You would have developed certain areas and maybe you would have included more language levels. You've got to, of course, write in a very concise and precise way because you've only got 200 words. So it's the old thing of, you know, every time you start typing a sentence, make sure that you've got in your mind exactly how that sentence is going to end. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a whole load of verbiage. You're going to end up with writing that actually seems like speech. So nice and controlled and concise, because after all, it has to be written in report style. So you're using a formal register and you need to be nominalizing, i.e. using noun forms rather than verb forms, and using the passive voice. So you're putting the emphasis on the investigation and not on you, the actual investigator. Okay, let's have a look at an example of this. These strange bits of spaghetti here, what do they signify? Well, let's have a look. Here is a conclusion, a first paragraph of a piece. The aim of this investigation was to identify and evaluate how the language of social network statuses changed over a period of 4 years. One interesting conclusion was the increase in level of lexical formality and complexity, possibly linking to Goffman's theory of negative face in which depersonalized language is used to create distance between addresser and addressee. The decline in the number of non-standard spellings perhaps reflects a reduced desire for the covert prestige that non-standard forms could give young people at certain times. And a further significant finding was the consistent use over time of personal, spatial, and temporal deixis, reflecting the writer's assumptions about the reader's knowledge and confirming that this mode of communication is more characteristic of spoken mode rather than formal writing. Okay, so what's good about this? Because this is a student who gets an A or an A star. Well, first of all, you've got your first sentence that does that. It's restating the investigation question in only one sentence. Okay, so in this case, this is a student who's been looking at social network comments and how they've changed over 4 years. Interesting idea. Are you noticing the use of the adjectives? You know, this student is putting in there the pre-modifying adjective interesting and another pre-modifying adjective there significant. So this is suggesting that there are some pretty important findings that are coming out of the study. What else have we got? We've got the reference to Goffman here, the linguistic superhero Goffman. And this reminds the examiner that you linked your observations to AO2, i.e. concepts and theories. What else have we got? We've got these little adverbs like possibly and perhaps. And what they do is they signal that you are being cautious rather than dogmatic in your conclusions. And guess what? Cautious conclusions, that's what is in the criteria for A and A star. And what else have we got? We've got very precise use of AO1 terms, the sorts of terms that you wouldn't possibly have known doing English GCSE. I'm talking about things like, deixis, differentiating between personal, spatial, and temporal deixis. And here they're linked in really nice with AO3 points about context. In this case, it's about mode. So that's a pretty good, classically good first paragraph of your conclusion. Let's now move on to the evaluation. A strength of the investigation was the original and personal nature of the data, which could be evaluated systematically for evidence of diachronic variation. Given more time, further data samples could have been explored, including samples from other social media sites, to determine whether similar patterns of language change might be identified across the social network. Given the pace of change in digital communication, it would be interesting to extend this study further to trace how an individual's language on social media might change over a longer timescale through the early adult years. Yes, 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 this is an A grade. So what this student is doing is identifying a particular strength of the study, in this case saying it was original and personal nature of the data, and it's using the passive voice, which could be evaluated systematically. Notice the use of the passive voice doesn't use first person singular pronouns. I did such and such. No, no, no. It uses the passive voice. So it feels like that it's a report. What else is good? It identifies how the investigation could have been developed if given more time and a longer WC, which doesn't stand for water closet, but sounds for word count. So it's basically pointing out, look, if I had more time, I would have collected a whole load more data to see if, those patterns that I've discovered were represented across a wider range of data. Okay, and what the student is doing is, in this last sentence, they're giving a sense of the sort of possible future areas of investigation within this field. She's saying, well, look, if I had more time or the opportunity, wouldn't it be interesting for me to do this? In this case, to look at how an individual's language on social media might change over a longer time scale through their early adult years. So you're really getting the sense that, this student is only limited by the parameters of the investigation and the fact that actually in total they've only got 2,000 words, and therefore it wasn't possible for them to pursue their dreams and aspirations. So you've got a very good example there of a conclusion stroke evaluation, and I hope that you've seen there how the two paragraphs are actually doing very different things. Finally then, when you look back over your investigation, think about these areas. I've got a couple of slides here, and you need to think, well, do they apply to above or below average investigations? So just pause the video there. Go through each of them, and does each of them apply to above average or below average criteria? Okay, I am assuming that you have done that, although assuming makes an ass out of you and me. So let's have a look. Data is narrow, random, and easily acquired. It's got to be below average, hasn't it? I mean, the whole point of a language investigation is that you are not just looking at language randomly, but you're looking at language in a very comprehensive and systematic way. So that would be below average. Analysis has a sense of systematic organization, above average, got to be. Thirdly, the question is precisely worded. I would hope that all your questions are precisely worded, and therefore it's above average. Features are spotted. That's never a good thing, just to spot features. To say, for example, here Joe Biden has used 3 interrogative forms on the first page of his transcript. Because what would be the point of just spotting a feature? That's not really analysis. So feature spotting is a feature of a below average investigation. On the other hand, analysis contains meticulous detail. It's got to be good, hasn't it? So you've got a pre-modifying adjective there, meticulous, that shows a lot of precision has gone into the analysis. A little evidence of wide reading. I don't like the look of that pre-modifying adjective, little. It implies there hasn't really been very much secondary reading going on. So that's below average. Dramatic claims made on limited data. Now that is not good either. You know, overbold dramatic claims, for example, saying, oh yes, this shows that men do dominate women, i.e. applying gender theory in a very kind of heavy-handed way. That's not good on a language investigation. Original topic area resulting from students' own enthusiasm and what would that be? It's got to be interest. That's got to be good, hasn't it? That actually the whole point of doing a language investigation is that it's giving you an element of control so that you are actually analysing things that you're personally interested in. So that would be an above average. Occasional references to contextual factors. Well, given that context gets 20 out of the 50 marks, occasional just doesn't cut it, does it? So it needs to be lots and lots of references to contextual factors. Right, on to the next one. Again, pause the video. Are these characteristics of above or below average investigations? Okay, let's go through the answers. Open-minded sense of inquiry. It's got to be good. The last thing that you want to be doing is showing that you are proving just something that you know would be there in the first place. So that's why it's got to be open-ended. Overall word count 1,640. Missed opportunities. Your word count is 2,000 words, give or take 100 words here or there. So 1,640 is well short. Missed opportunities. Balanced tentative conclusion. That's got to be good. You're not making overbold claims about things. That's nice. Range of presentational devices select to present different kinds of data. Yes, that's good. Are you occasionally using pie charts or tables or graphs in order to illustrate some of the patterns that are going on? That's got to be good, above average. Linguistic terms used sometimes. Oh dear, I don't like sometimes as an adverb. You know, I want there frequently or, you know, very often. So that's a below average. Perceptive understanding of investigation limitations is good, because perceptions means wise, And you've got to be drawing attention to the fact that this is only actually a very narrow bit of data that you've been analysing. So that's above average. Tables and charts without discrimination. Well, that adverbial without discrimination is not good because it means you haven't really thought very carefully about it. So that's not good. Each aspect of the analysis explicitly linked to the question. That's above average. Make sure that everything in your language investigation goes back to answering that question. And lastly, but by no means least, sophisticated, succinct expression. Well, given that, 15 out of your 50 marks are for AO1, and AO1 is about written expression as well as using key terms, then sophisticated expression is important. And succinct expression, i.e. you are saying the maximum amount in the minimum number of words, because succinct means concise. These are all the ingredients for a very, very successful language investigation. And I hope that you've been able to achieve those things. Okay, so thank you very much.